wanna stay ahead of the curve, then follow my words. All we doing, teach, train, innovate, solve, yeah. Teach, train, innovate, solve. If you wanna be ahead of the curve, then follow my words.
Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone, to TTIS, where we build confident, empowered educators through empathy, strategies, giving you practical tools that you can use today. And tonight's no different. We are discussing SPED 186 domain number 1. Its title is the Legal and Ethical Guidelines of Knowledge and Knowledge of Learners. This particular domain focuses on quite a few things, but first and foremost is the legal portion of it. Now, I've shared a video that talks about the 4 law parts of IDEA in which are very important. I'll be sure to load it somewhere here in order to support you. But in this domain, they're talking about the legal requirements, parent rights, confidentiality, due process, and ethical decision-making. And then the second very important part is it focuses on understanding of the learners and their characteristics. These kinds of things includes how does the disability affect the learner and the learning, developmental patterns that might be present, and then individual differences among students, because again, we cannot assume that just because a student has a label and has that all of the things that are going to be related, and everyone is therefore put together regarding that particular disability. So we have to be careful of that. But tonight I'm going to spend time talking about a few things. And I wanted to make sure, as always, that you know where we're headed. So first off, I'm going to talk about what should you know about the laws and responsibility. Some key concepts and one mistake in particular that I want to showcase and highlight about the exam 186 itself and many testers. And then lastly, we're going to look at the learners. These are the key sections or the key parts that I want to make sure that we cover, because again, this competency is going to be worth 18% of the exam, and you want to get all of the points that you possibly can in your efforts to get that 240. The exam assesses whether you understand that special education is both instructional and procedural, heavy on the procedural. So I often talk about the roadmap and the process that must be followed in order to actively participate in making certain that we are following the legal framework. So you have to know how to operate within that legal framework, make some collaborative decisions, and document services. Special education is not only about instruction, because it operates inside of this legal framework that's designed to protect students. And the SPED 186 exam reflects that reality. But I'm also going to say in another reality that you operating in the properness of this system will help you also in many ways. So as candidates pursue this exam, domain 1 questions, sometimes we get to an idea where they're thinking of things that might be helpful. But I want you to think compliance. It's one of the common mistakes that I'll dive into a little bit deeper during the presentation, but I just wanted to spotlight for just a second. So what does the law really require for educators to do? And that's really where we're landing here, where I've highlighted the state guidelines, the federal guidelines, and a particular court case. In domain number 1, the foundations of special education practice is really IDEA. The law requires us to have high expectations of our students, to strengthen the responsibility and the roles of our parents, to be that local education agency, often an acronym LEA, and coordinate with other educational service agencies. While we provide adequate special education and related services for our students, we also want to support high quality, intensive pre-service preparation. And some of the ways to do that is to offer very good professional development for all educators. Another key component here is that we enact scientifically based whole school approaches, because this could potentially reduce the students' need to be labeled. Things like having a school-wide positive behavior interventions and supports in place, an early reading program, and then early interventions. That'll all help with this, with the growing number of those that might have severe gaps because of those methods or lack thereof of those methods. Then there's a focus that must be on the teaching and the learning. Hopefully reducing paperwork and the requirements that really sometimes don't help with the overall results. Sometimes I'll just say that there's not a balance there, and it can be a detriment instead of help. And then lastly, support the development and the use of technology. In particular, they mention assistive technology here. But the exam really is asking you whether teachers understand the legal framework that governs special education, i.e. some of the things I have on your screen right now. That includes the law, IDEA, which is summarized, which I just summarized in the first section of my discussion with you. Then they want you to demonstrate your knowledge of Section 504, ADA, ESSA, and as well as the Texas guidelines like TAC and your ARD committee processes. Remember, I told you this is a lot about the procedures, the framework, the how do I fulfill it under the law. And then teachers are expected to understand their role in Child Find, because the earlier that we can help a student, usually the better off they're going to be and being serviced. So we're going to discuss the process a little bit tonight, and I'll be sure to make certain that I tag the Child Find video also at the top somewhere. Some other important factors are protecting students' confidentiality, implementing IEP with fidelity, and ensuring that the services are delivered according to the law. So what is this domain asking us? It's asking you, do you understand how the systems work? And now that I've kind of asked you that, let's jump into it, how we can help students. And then also, I guess I want to mention a common mistake that I see for testers. So let me start there. So often teachers will choose answers that sound like the immediate support that you want to choose. And here is where I'm going to say that if they give you an example like a student is struggling significantly in class, the possible answers might include something like provide tutoring, provide modified assignments, or refer for evaluation. All of those could be potentially correct, right? Depending on where you are in the process. But the correct answer is going to focus on the evaluation process first. Why? Because special education requires data and formal evaluations before any eligibility decisions can be made. Let's try another one. A teacher notices a student that's consistently struggling with reading comprehension and suspects a learning disability. What should the teacher do first? The incorrect thinking is that you immediately request special education placement, and they're going to put that in one of your distractors. But the correct thinking is initiate, again, the child find process and begin to gather the necessary documentation. And child find requires schools to identify students who need evaluation. But I want to stop for just a moment before we move forward. And I want to pause to kind of tell you just for a moment and share something that I see almost every week. I have the pleasure of receiving many teachers' diagnostic exam results. And this pattern might surprise you, but I've seen it consistently. As I've said many times, it's not all about effort, because you're studying hard, but still with some SPED 161 mindsets. The real challenge is understanding how this newer version of the exam is structured and how to evaluate these scenarios. And they're going to give you quite a few. The SPED 186 is not primarily about memorization. It's about decision making. That's what this exam is. And the questions are designed to see whether you understand the process behind special education. That legal framework I mentioned before, the evaluation process, the data, and the instructional decisions that follow. That's why many of you might feel frustrated. You know the terminology, you've read the preparation manuals, but when the scenarios appear, you're unsure how to think through the decisions. But when you work with me, we start by looking at your diagnostic results together. We identify exactly which domains are lowering your score and where the decision gaps are occurring. From there, we build a focus study plan so that your time and your effort are directed directly toward the areas that actually move your scores up. Because the truth is, most of you don't need to relearn everything. You need clarity about where to focus, either because you might feel overwhelmed or you might have decision fatigue. These are all real things. And if you've already taken a diagnostic assessment and you want help understanding what your results mean, I want you to book a Texas Blueprint session. I'm going to put the link somewhere below in the show notes. After you schedule this appointment, you send us your results. I'll review them and we'll review them together. You'll know exactly where to direct your study time. Now, let's go ahead and get back into our conversation, because the next section of the exam is going to take us deeper into competency number 1. And in particular, what does the law require educators to do? There is so many points and parts within this. And my graphic, I'm definitely going to show on social media this week, so you'll get a larger view of it. But the things that I talked to you about before, the higher expectation for the kids, less paperwork, maybe the possibility of introducing more technology that could be an assistant to what you're trying to do. Those early interventions and empowering our parents. Those are the kinds of things that we want to make sure that we're doing and understanding in domain 1. Still in domain 1, there's this clarification between what the differences and what the similarities are between 504 and the IEP. See, both of these are a plan. One that is governed by the law, and another one that has implications of the civil rights plan. And I shouldn't say implications. It is a civil rights law. But both of these, their efforts are to remove barriers so students can succeed. So when they're talking about the differences, they're asking us to know big parts of how they differ. You know, most of the time when I see it this way, I think of a Venn diagram. And how is 504 so much more different than IEP? And then I've already kind of talked to you about how they intersect with one another. That's a great way for you to kind of script out to help you to remember those differences. SPED Act 186 exam wants you to know whether or not you can distinguish how disabilities, development, and environmental factors may influence our students' learning and behavior. I talk about executive functioning, and I do have a video that I'm going to put here again that points out parts that will help you to understand that sometimes it's not just instructional, but in this section, it also talks about social skills and the lens of you recognizing how these factors play together. Things like trauma, language differences, brain development, social experiences, and emotional needs. But the exam also wants us to understand these influences even more deeply than that, because they affect instruction. And they're questions that they're going to ask you. They are not surface level questions, but they're going to expect you to distinguish between the learning disabilities and other influences. And as I'm displaying on your screen right now, not only those that are there, biological, the physical, the emotional, but also how does stress play a part? How does bullying play a part? Those are going to be some of the key factors that they mention on this exam as well. Because students are not simply smaller versions of adults. Their brains are still developing from early childhood all the way through young adulthood. And that development directly influences how they learn, make decisions, and regulate their behavior. And one of the most important areas of the brain for educators to understand is the prefrontal cortex. The brain is our powerhouse. And in this region, it supports the executive functioning skills, such as your decision-making, impulse control, definitely planning, and problem solving. And the key point here is that part of the brain develops gradually over time or is not fully developed over that time. There's going to be some emerging issues that happen. And even though I'm primarily talking about younger students, this happens even in adolescence. Prefrontal cortex is still maturing. And for us, it means that behaviors such as difficulty with organization, that impulse responses that I talked about, the challenges with planning, staying organized, they're all part of the developmental stages. Not simply whether the student is motivated, or if they just don't want to comply. For students receiving special education services, these developmental differences may be even more significant depending on their disability categories. Case in point, if I have an ADHD student, they might struggle with impulse control and sustained attention, while a student with autism may experience differences in social communication and interpersonal interaction. What the exam wants you to recognize is that learning and behavior are influenced by development, not just instruction. So when we see a scenario describing challenges with decision making, emotional regulation, problem solving, the question is often asking you to think about the developmental process, developmental readiness, and appropriate supports that can be put in place, not punishment or immediate correction. And sometimes those are some of the choices that the teachers are leaning toward when they're answering them. But if we can understand how the brain develops, it can help us to respond with strategies that support growth rather than simply reacting to behavior. And that awareness is exactly what SPED 186 exam is measuring. Domain 1 really is talking to us specifically about the law and the learner. First part, do you understand the legal system that protects students? The second part, do you understand the learner inside that system? And once you understand the law and the learner, the next question is, do you understand the student's needs inside of this framework? Another question I ask is, how do we gather the right data to support the students? And that's exactly what domain number 2 focuses on. It's titled Assessment and Program Planning, and that's where we'll be unpacking next week. I want to thank you for spending time with me tonight. As always, I'm grateful that you landed here on our channel, where we intend to break down and clarify all 5 of the domains for SPED 186. This is our mini series, and we're glad that you've arrived here. Now, if you've taken a diagnostic assessment and you're unsure what those results actually mean, your next step is a Texas Blueprint session with us. In that session, we're going to review your report together. We're going to identify the exact competencies that you need, and we're going to build a plan, one where you're not guessing, but you're actually preparing to pass. Now, you've worked incredibly hard, and you might be studying, unfortunately, the wrong areas. The goal of this session is actually to make your efforts to be aimed at truly the right direction. And if that sounds like what you need, as I told you before, the link is going to be down below. Because I come here weekly, providing you with snippets, ways to nudge you to keep studying, trying to help you as best I possibly can, because I'm cheering for you. And I look forward to hearing when my students, my colleagues, my teachers have passed their exam. Well, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button. We are on several platforms. We'd love for you to join us there as well. Hit the notification bell too, so that each Monday that we come back to you at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, you'll be ready. You'll have our information, and you'll know where we're headed. All right, everyone. Have a great evening. Good night.